Coming up on Theater Talk.
I was 20, and I'm at home in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and my mother comes to my bedroom and says, someone claiming to be Tennessee Williams is on the phone. And I went to, and I hadn't told anybody, so I said, it has to be. Went to the phone, and he said, let's have lunch. And I said, where are you? And he said, I'm at the Royal Orleans Hotel. And I go, I'm in Baton Rouge. It's 80 miles away. And he goes, well, you better hurry.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, it has been a season of extraordinary theater books. Of course, we have to mention
Razzle Dazzle, The Battle for Broadway by Michael Riedel, out from Simon & Schuster.
But another book, you'll forgive me, which I enjoyed just as much, almost just as much, is this wonderful book by tonight's guest, Follies of God, Tennessee Williams, and the Women of the Fog. An amazing book, which is so hard to describe that James Grissom, author of this book, I'm going to ask you to set it up for us.
Okay. It's not a biography.
No. It's impressionistic, though.
Well, Doug McGrath has been really sweet. He said it's like an indirect biography. I had a particular assignment from Tennessee.
Now, tell us first, how did you come to write this book? How did you come to meet Tennessee Williams?
I thought I wanted to be an actor, tried that, realized how mistaken I was, and then began studying literature and writing. And Marian, Seldes, whom I'd met, and we'll talk about, she brought us all together. She said, well, you have a gift for getting in touch with the people you need. Like, I just walked backstage and we became friends. So she said, write to a writer who means a lot to you. And I wrote a letter to Tennessee Williams. Months passed, at least 6 months, and I'm at home in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and my mother comes to my bedroom and says, with a look that, you know, only my mother had, like, someone claiming to be Tennessee Williams is on the phone. And I went to, and I hadn't told anybody, so I said, it has to be. Went to the phone, and he said, perhaps you can be of some help to me. Okay.
And I want to say, you'd also sent him your picture.
Well, I should have brought it today. In the South, boys entered beauty pageants, and I entered the Belles and Beaux beauty pageant at Baton Rouge High.
And you sent him
that picture.
I was adorable, and I wrote these Flannery O'Connor-like short stories. He went, it's so odd, I love it. So I think that definitely intrigued him. And he said, let's have lunch. And I said, where are you? And he said, I'm at the Royal Orleans Hotel. And I go, I'm in Baton Rouge. It's 80 miles away. And he goes, well, you better hurry. And so, all right. So I got in my Malibu and like broke every speed record and got there. And he had asked me to meet him in Jackson Square. And there he was in this horrible raccoon coat, which everyone knows.
Yeah, now pictures of him famous.
Now, how old was he at this point, Tennessee Williams?
70, I think.
Okay.
71, yeah. And I was 20, and we went to the Court of Two Sisters and had lunch.
Restaurant, yeah.
And I thought that would be it. But then he said, come with me. We're going to Louis's place. And I thought we were going to some guy's apartment. It was St. Louis Cathedral. And we lit a candle for Maureen Stapleton, and he bought me a rosary. And I was a Baptist. So when he handed it to me, it was like he'd handed me an iguana.
And like, you have the rosary right here.
I have the rosary right here. And he was going through them and going, no. No. And this woman was like, and he says, this is perfect for you. And he called me Dixie. This is perfect for Dixie. And the woman said, she got really like, very Eileen Atkins.
The woman in the cathedral now?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
She went, I can't sell this to you. I said, she knows I'm Baptist. No, the Christ is missing.
No.
The Christ figure had fallen off into the pouch. And Tennessee said, perfect. I don't want no desultory Jesus hanging around. So then he renamed all the beads for women. So I can't do a Catholic rosary, but I can do this one. This Lillian Gish. Marian's over here. I mean, Maria Tucci's on here.
Jessica Tandy, is she around there?
Eva Le Gallienne.
Eva Le Gallienne. She has a bead.
Is there a Marlon Brando was the Jesus that fell off?
Marlon Brando, yes. Marlon, none of the men rated a bead.
Right, only the women.
No man rated a bead.
But that brings us to your book, because your book is really perceptions of Tennessee through the women he worked with and their perceptions of him?
Well, when I met him, he quoted almost verbatim a horrible review Robert Brustein had written about him. And he said, now I could be bitter about this, but I choose not to be, because then I destroy myself. And the way I get up every day to face the pale judgment, which is what he called the blank page, is I remember the people who mattered to me. And he goes, and you can use these beads to like focus on Lillian Gish, Maria Tucci, Beatrice Straight, Marian Seldes. Those are the women who help me believe I can do it again.
So how does the phrase women of the fog?
Well, because when Tennessee was young, he said he couldn't understand why. It probably came because he was always a dreamer and was abused, and would go up to his room and would put on the radio and dream a little bit. And he said whenever he closed his eyes, he could see a stage, a proscenium stage, and there would be fog on it. And out of the fog, a woman would appear, and she'd walk out and just start talking. And he would follow it. And so he said all of these characters, Alma, Blanche, all of the characters walked out of this fog. So that's what the term women of the fog.
And now, he sort of charged you to meet these women and write about them way back then, but then it didn't come together. Can you tell us about that?
I couldn't imagine doing it. I mean,
what did he ask you to do?
He said, well, come to New York. I can put you at the Hotel Easy-Lay, or the Elysee. That's what he called it.
Where he died.
Yeah, I can put you at the Easy-Lay or Manhattan Plaza.
He had an apartment in Manhattan.
Yeah, like, what's the problem? And I went, what's the problem? Because by the end of certain days, I would think I'd had a stroke because he'd been drinking.
Yes.
And
you're writing everything down, right?
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, I've had a stroke because I don't understand. And I would have to talk to someone else to make sure that I still had the capacity to understand human speech. And no matter how, I mean, I loved him, and I never felt unsafe with him, but I always was near my car. If anything had happened, I could have gotten into my car. And I thought, I'm in New York now, and I'm in his care. And also, I said to him, let me get this straight. I'm supposed to go knock on Julie Harris's door and say, you don't know me, but Tennessee wants to know if he ever mattered to you.
Yeah, so he wanted you to go talk to all these women
and then he
to
said,
find out how
he said,
they
you
mattered.
are the canary in the coal mine of my need. And I went, I'm 20 years old. It's like, and I was talking, see, I had already met Marian. Tennessee, when he started giving me the names of women I should meet, and I'm writing them down. When he got to Marian's name, I went, oh, I know her, which had to be mind-boggling, this 20-year-old Yahoo in Louisiana. How do you know Marian Seldes? And I told him on a high school drama trip, I had gone backstage at the Music Box where she was in Death Trap and asked her to sign my copy of The Bright Lights, and told her I wanted to be an actor or a writer. And for reasons I'll never understand, she said, let's be friends.
That was our Marian.
We spoke on the phone once a week.
Yeah.
And she read everything I wrote. And when I told Tennessee that, unbeknownst to me, he went back to his hotel room at the Royal Orleans and called Marian, who was in the phone book, Plaza 34595, and called and said, and got like a reference check, like, you know a boy, Jimmy Grissom? And she was like, yeah. And then, of course, a few days later, she called me and said, what is going on? You know, but she cleared it. You know, he suddenly felt safe with me. And then when I moved to New York in '89, I had an IBM Selectric. There was no internet. The only way to find someone was celebrity service. Does anybody remember that?
Yeah, sure.
I would call them and go, I need Barbara Bel Geddes, and they'd say, okay. Marian got to everybody for me, almost everybody.
So Tennessee Williams, when you were 20 years old, asked you to do this book, but you were basically scared, and you didn't.
And I also didn't know how to do it. And for a very long time, I didn't know how to write this book.
Yeah.
It took getting older, because when you're 20, even into the late 20s, you don't know what a time knot is.
Yeah.
And Tennessee kept talking about he was caught in a time knot of knowing you don't have that much time left. And you don't know if the talent and the energy are going to be there. And at 20, you're like, oh, that won't happen to me.
So then after he died, you decided to do the book.
Well, not right away.
No, because he died quite
while. I just went, well, I have the memory, and I have this, and I kept.
And you had notes and interviews.
Oh, and I shared all of it with Marian, and I would say, and he said this, and he said that, and she'd go, and she would tell me, this is remarkable. But when I moved to New York on St. Patrick's Day of 1989, I thought the parade was for me. Like, finally, you're here. Marian and I had lunch at the Coffee House Club, and she pulled out this big tote bag and dumped on the table all the letters I'd sent her. And she said, this is a book. And I said, I don't know how to write it. She goes, we'll figure it out.
when you were with Tennessee Williams, when you were young, he spent so much time talking to you about his great unhappiness that he couldn't really write classic plays anymore.
Really?
Talk about that. I mean, he seemed to be a man obsessed, and also I wondered how intoxicated he was most of the time.
I mean, was it the addictions was debilitating for the writing?
Yeah, he talked about he no longer had, glandular flexibility or mental flexibility. And he was doing something he called faking the fog. Like when he closed his eyes, no Maggie the cat came out of the fog and started talking. So he would watch movies over and over again, waiting for a voice. And sometimes he'd hear a voice, like he saw Ellen Burstyn. I mean, a lot of things negative can be said about Maria St. Just, but she sat with him through 3 showings of The Exorcist.
She was his companion.
Yeah, because he kept saying, Ellen Burstyn is speaking to me. Or he'd pull the TV up next to him where he had a table with a typewriter or a pad, and he would say, wait, what's that voice? But he felt like he couldn't do it anymore, and he was terrified that maybe there is a limit. Like, this is all you can do. But he didn't want to believe it. He still was hopeful, and he said, I'm going to start over, and you're going to help me. And I'm like...
I don't see any women coming out of the fog.
I'm a Yahoo. I'm 20. What am I?
But you were
hold on one second. But this is interesting though, because and sad. So he heard women unique to him in the fog, but at the end he had to turn it on and get it from somebody else, really.
Yeah. And I will say this is what happened when I finally got to New York and started talking to these women. A lot of them felt really guilty about the fact that they avoided him. Maureen Stapleton, who loved him so much and was such an angel, said, I got tired of the whining. And I would just say, go write. But now you're hanging around here drinking my Blue Nun. That's not writing, So she would lose patience with him. And I just think he was ashamed to go to people like Geraldine Page, Jessica Tandy, whom he held in such esteem, and reveal himself in the state he was in at that time.
We all think about Tennessee Williams dying, allegedly choking on a pill bottle, but that we weren't quite as aware of the ravages of addiction, and that he was such an addict at that point. Did he have any consciousness of how these substances were
and he would
messing
talk
him
about
up?
it. He would tell me, don't become addicted to the powders and the pills. And he actually didn't choke on a
Yes,
bottle cap.
that's why.
I mean, his body just failed from acute drug and alcohol intoxication.
In addition to Maureen, did you feel that some of these women who had been in his plays had really turned their backs on him?
I don't mean that malignantly, like I don't want to talk to you.
Right.
But they tended to be very positive people who just do the work, one foot in front of the other.
Right.
And when they would give him that sort of advice, that's not what he wanted to hear. That's true of a lot of people. I mean, someone wants to lose weight like me, you don't want to hear, well, you have to cut back and exercise more. Is there another way to do this? I mean, can I take a pill or watch a movie? And that's what Tennessee was happening with him. So they were getting irritated with his neediness of wanting to be. And when he met me, I think it was comfortable to be with this rube that I was at 20. But he also liked that I knew everyone he mentioned. He would have loved you at 20 because he would throw out Sidney Howard's name and you could go, oh, Alien Corn. They knew what they wanted. I mean, actors, actresses, and I knew who they were. And we also imitated everybody. He was a great mimic.
He was. I'd always heard, Liz Ashley told me he was a great mimic.
I loved Liz Ashley.
And she's a woman of the fog,
But she wouldn't talk to me, so she's not in the book.
Oh.
But there's a lot about Elizabeth Ashley. Well, she didn't say, I'm not going to talk to you. She just never responded. So we'll never know what happened.
And I mentioned...
Lost in the mail. But there's a lot of her in the Marlon Brando book, because Marlon Brando...
And that's your next book.
Yeah. Marlon Brando I met because I became friends with an actress named Barbara Baxley, who was really helpful in the whole chapter on William Inge, because she tried to make him straight and tried to marry him. We'll talk. There need to be nachos or something. But I know, we'll talk, Michael, calm down. Barbara kept calling Marlon and saying, you got to talk to this kid. And he went, oh, I don't want to. And then Barbara died. And we put together a memorial service for her, and at 2 a.m. one morning, Marlon Brando calls me. And he says, I feel bad about Barbara, and I feel bad about Tennessee. And he was beginning to write his book. So we kind of were therapists for each other. And he asked me what I was doing. At that time, I was a copy editor at Penthouse. Max. And he says...
Talking to Marlon Brando in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and it's like, but it's okay. I can talk. And he was very funny. He would call me and say, I have some new synonyms for ejaculate that I think you can use. So he was very funny. But
you got to put that in your column.
Yes, exactly. But Marlon Brando was very funny. But we acted as therapists for each other. And I think it's like...
How did he feel about Tennessee Williams at the end?
He loved Tennessee, but they had not seen each other in years. And it was that very intense, magical time of Streetcar.
Yeah.
And then you just drift.
Yeah.
And then he tried in vain. He really wanted. Okay, do you know who the first two choices for the original Broadway production of Orpheus Descending were? Marlon Brando. Elvis Presley.
Oh, right. Yes, Elvis Presley. That's right. Yeah.
And then, and by that point, Marlon had no intention of ever going back to the stage.
No.
But he would kept writing plays. Like, this is for you, Marlon. This is for you, Marlon.
Oh, Tennessee really good?
Yeah. And then they spent time on the film version,
right.
The fugitive kind of Orpheus. I mean, they loved each other. And Marlon would get very poetic about how we lose track of people.
Do you have all of these interviews you did with these women about Tennessee? Do you have them on tape, or would you
Some
take
of them are on tape,
down?
but I'm not good with tape. When I met with Tennessee, I did not own a tape recorder.
Right.
And I went there thinking we'd have lunch. And then when
Little did you know you'd become his Boswell.
Yeah, and so I wrote everything down.
It's amazing. Do you know shorthand or something?
I have my own version.
Yeah, I see.
So like if I showed it to anyone who learned shorthand, they would not know what it was.
So would you write while he was talking, or would you then go home and write?
And I would go home and type it up.
I think the only woman of the fog who's still alive is Lois Smith.
Well, Franny Sternhagen.
Franny Sternhagen.
Yeah, Franny, yeah.
Lois Smith. And I want you to say a little bit about Tennessee's regard for her.
Oh, in that period of Orpheus Descending, where he really knew it wasn't working, he just focused on her.
She was there, yeah.
And he said, I'm paraphrasing, but something like she treated each word like a neophyte priest with his first host, or a virginal male with his first female breast. It was like this incredible tenderness that she brought, and a full intelligence. And she'd also been in a Glass Menagerie production with Helen Hayes. And he said she was the first person who got Laura right, because so often that is an unplayable role, and they play the limp, and he said, but she played the mental condition that created the limp, and he just thought she was terrific. And I mean, if we talk about Marian, Seldes, Frances Sternhagen, Lois Smith, they're angelic, and they really helped get this book.
How so angelic? In their treatment of you?
Oh, what do you need?
Yeah.
Their attitude was, how can I help? And supportive of so many people in the theater, and showing up for everything. And
oh yes, well Kevin Spacey, when he was on here, Marian was his teacher. He said if he did when he was an unknown actor, at every little tiny play in some basement, he would look out and there would be Marian leaning in, hanging
always
on his every word.
And one of the first conversations that Tennessee and I had, and I told this to Marian, and she loved it, because it just fit perfectly with her philosophy. When I was working at the Metropolitan Museum bookstore, I waited on you. I was diagnosed with cancer, and I didn't have insurance, and I had this part-time job. It all worked out fine, but Marian remembered that Tennessee asked me once what I thought. He asked me for a definition of evil, which I guess was a litmus test. And I said, I think it's evil. Intercessory prayer is evil. And he went, what? I mean, I could see him going like, who is this? And I said, I think that if you go to a person, or a person comes to you and says, I'm so depressed and hungry, and you go, I'll pray for you. It's so evil. Offer them food or time. And so Marian, when I was diagnosed and would go get the chemo, she was in her 70s then, late 70s, would come to my apartment. She would ask me how my sock drawer was doing, because that's where I put money, the little pushki. People have like the safe money. Well, she came to my apartment and bought groceries. This is Marian Seldes coming to my apartment, bringing groceries, asking if she can take my laundry out and so forth. And the next day she called and said, now how is the sock drawer doing? And I go, I don't even want to look. Go look. She'd put money in my sock drawer.
Really?
So this is the kind of person Marian is. Calling people who I know didn't want to talk to me, because interviews are kind of like a CAT scan after a while. It's like, and she would say, no, you have to. And she read every word of the book and kept it by her bed.
When you were with Tennessee Williams at this point in his life, what was his relationship with, and did he talk at all about Elia Kazan, with whom he'd had the great successes?
Oh, he loved him. And
were they in touch at this period when you knew Tennessee?
I don't think they were in regular communication, but it wasn't because of a falling out or anything. I think it was just Tennessee was busy and off doing his thing. He said the proof is in the pudding. The quality of my plays fell off after.
Because Anne stopped.
Yeah.
And when he was working on Nye the Iguana, for instance, he just like, oh God, if only Gadge were here. Gadge didn't say, change this word to this. It wasn't that meddlesome. But he would just say, it's not working for me, let's talk it out. And in the course of that, Tennessee would say, now I know how to do it.
Our friend Elaine Stritch, does she...
Elaine's not in that book. She's in the Marlon Brando book.
Because she and Marlon Brando were putting up the jam together, as she might say.
I know, I love that. Well, Marlon...
Putting up the jam.
Yeah.
Marlon, his line, and then I would call Elaine, who lived on 72nd Street then. He would say, well, pass that by Elaine. And I'd call Elaine the next day and go, okay, I spoke to Marlon. Oh, Jesus. I'm supposed to pass this by you. And she would pass judgment on it, and I'd call him back.
Really?
Yeah.
So this is interesting, though. Marlon Brando, who was a recluse and would never talk to the press, was a chatty Cathy with you on the phone?
Well, and then his was funny. It was so non-threatening. I was a nobody, and we never saw each other. So it was a voice in the night.
You never met?
No. He would call me. This is a classic Marlon Brando. He would call me and say, okay, can you talk to me for an hour and 40 minutes? Okay. Is something coming on Cinemax that you need to see? I mean, why? He goes, no, I think if I talk to you for an hour and 40 minutes, I won't eat the cake that's in the kitchen. He was like doing like hypnosis and mind control, Silva mind control.
Oh.
And so I'd talk to him and he'd say, okay, I think I can go to bed. Then I would talk to him a few days later and he'd go, I ate the cake.
I ate the cake, of course.
But I mean, it's just, but it's no reflection on you. You know, I had a wonderful conversation. But I think I just made him laugh. And of course, his son had just been arrested.
The Brando book is going to be a biography of him or just your conversations?
Here's what it is. I couldn't put everything in Follies of God. And this is a question that a lot of people have asked, and they're right to. Why did Tennessee talk to you? And why did Marlon Brando talk to you? We were all victims of abuse. Yeah. And what we found, like when Tennessee met with me, he said, I was not abused in the home. Marlon and Tennessee were abused in the home. I had to be bused to a school to be abused. So, but anyway, so we found refuge in the theater and movies. Well, movies first, then the theater, and the people who worked in both. And when I was on the phone with Marlon, he had read some of my writing. Barbara Baxley had sent it, and he says, you have the perfume. You know, and he says, you escaped from a sea in which I almost drowned. Oh. So he goes, it's like a moral sin to not. So we talked about that and how we got out of it.
I want to say, Follies of God is going to come out in paperback?
Yeah, August 9th, 2016, which Tennessee would be laughing hysterically because that is the date of the Tate LaBianca murders. And there's a link here because when Tennessee wrote Streetcar for Lillian Gish,
right.
It was called The Moon and the Royal Balconies at that time. And he mailed it to Lillian Gish at 10050 Cielo Drive.
Which is
where Sharon Tate was.
Which was the Benedict Canyon house.
Yeah, and Marlon would call Lillian after the murders were announced, and he'd say, anything strange happened in that house when you were there. I mean, he was obsessed with this house.
And there's some mystical, that it was some mystical thing?
He thinks it was, he says, I'm convinced it was a sacrificial place, because he went up there, and it looks out over the canyon. He goes, Indians probably kill people here. I mean, he was just...
So he was magical doing magical things.
So he would go, and this is a great quote. We were talking about in the hall, and Susan being the rock, as Elaine Stritch said, and you being the firefly, as Elaine Stritch said. She kept saying, save it for the show, save it for the show, don't talk away the show. Tennessee said the great lies. He had this list of great lies. Mm-hmm. Among them were people who claimed to have seen Anyone Can Whistle. If they'd all seen it, it'd still be running.
Exactly.
Right? Everyone claimed to see Anyone Can Whistle, and everyone claimed to have been invited to Sharon Tate's house.
That night.
And at the last minute,
the
child got sick.
Right.
The Alfa Romeo was on the fritz. It could have been me.
I never knew that Lillian Gish had lived in that.
Yeah, Henry Fonda lived there.
It's in the book. So many things in this book. We haven't talked about the fabulous Katharine Hepburn chapter. I cannot recommend this book enough, Follies of God, Tennessee Williams, and the Women of the Fog. You will love it.
By James Grissom. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Come back with Marlon Brando.
Yes,
I'll come back
please.
anytime.
Were you taping Marlon Brando on the phone at all?
No,
no.
Write it
I
down.
wrote everything down and then mailed it to him Mulholland Drive. And I told Carl Bernstein that once because his editor is next to mine at Knopf. And he went, "You can't do that." And he realized then he can't do it with like a politician.
Right.
But I said, no one ever deleted anything.
Yeah.
They
Nobody changed their words? They just...
No. Yeah.
No. Yeah, well, he'd be a journalist, Carl Bernstein, so you would never run your transcripts by the person that you're writing about.
But even when I showed it to him, it didn't mean I was going to do what they asked me to do. Like I'd say, I really have to keep that in. And no one ever fought with me and said, no, take it out.
Okay.
But like Marlon Brando was critical of Grace Kelly. And so then when I taped, he said I was very excited winning an Academy Award. Then they gave one to Grace Kelly the same night, and I went,
why didn't you like Grace Kelly? Everyone loves Grace Kelly.
I think he loved Grace Kelly, the woman, but I think the act is like, come on.
No.
And then he read that and said, I'm not going to take that out, but I need to explain more. So.
And the book is Follies of God, Tennessee Williams, and the Women of the Fog by James Grissom. A fascinating, haunting, very witty and funny book at times. Interesting portrait of Tennessee Williams. Thanks a lot for being our guest tonight.
Thank you, James. Will you sign my book?
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
All right, thanks.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Loewe Foundation, the CORY and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the NOEL Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you,